Air Force and is currently working alongside the USA to develop it. As for machines, its piece de resistance is the Eurofighter Typhoon, of which it has 128. It also owns some US-built McDonnell Douglas F4F Phantom IIs. Poland has in total 465 aircraft, of which 99 are fighter aircraft, 99 attack aircraft, 229 transport aircraft, 98 trainer aircraft, 211 helicopters with 29 attack helicopters. In terms of its fighters and multi-role aircraft, you could say the fleet is aging, but you could also say that they were at least some of the best planes of the past. That includes 31 MiG-29s, actually donated by Germany, 36 F-16s, and 32 Russian-made Sukhoi Su-22s. We have to go with Germany again here, given its large fleet of Eurofighter Typhoons. As for the navies of these two nations, they certainly wouldn't get near a top 5 list, and to be honest, wouldn't even get on a top 10 list. In this matchup, both countries would likely not be settling the dispute in the seas. Germany's navy force consists of 0 aircraft carriers, 0 destroyers, 10 frigates, 5 corvettes, 6 submarines, 13 mine warfare, 11 replenishment ships, and 20 miscellaneous auxiliary vessels. When we talk about German naval strength these days, we are indubitably talking about the past. Poland can't really boast its naval strength either. Its fleet consists of 0 aircraft carriers, 0 destroyers, 2 frigates, 2 corvettes, 5 submarines, 3 patrol craft, and 25 mine warfare vessels. Poland doesn't seem very interested in its navy. Reuters reported in 2017 that Poland was about to push $55 billion into its military in the next 15 years, but guess what? Not much of that will go to strengthening the navy. As for nuclear weapons, Poland doesn't have any, although during the Cold War the Soviets did stockpile some of them there. Germany doesn't have any either, although under the NATO nuclear weapons sharing program, it does train to let them go if need be. If these two nations were to get into a wrangle, it would be one on land and in the air, but then as both are close allies of most developed democratic nations, it would depend a lot on who was seen as the aggressor as to whom would be befriended. It's extremely unlikely there will be any friction, unless of course a people's revolution takes place in either country promoting an alternative to capitalism or democracy. In that case, they would likely be the enemy of almost everyone. So, how do you feel about this hypothetical matchup? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called China versus the United States. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and
Unfortunately for the United States, one of its greatest trading partners also happens to be one of its greatest adversaries. While the US has never officially been at war with China, it has in fact fought several proxy wars with it, including the Vietnam War as well as the Korean War. Neither of those two wars worked out too well for the United States. In this episode of the Infographics Show, we thought we would take a closer look at who would win if a war broke out between China and the United States of America. In terms of financial resources, America's military puts China's military to shame. The annual defense budget of China is $147 billion, which is 2.1% of its GDP, while the annual defense budget of the United States is $664 billion, which is 2.4% of its GDP. In terms of sheer manpower numbers, China clearly has the advantage. It has a population of 1.4 billion people, with 2,335,000 active military personnel. The US, on the other hand, has a total population of 321 million people, with 1.4 million people who are active frontline personnel. Although a land war between China and America is unlikely, the two countries have almost an equal number of tanks and self-propelled guns. China has far more towed artillery, but the US has 10 times the amount of armored fighting vehicles. With regard to air power, currently the US has a larger and more modern air force with a total of 13,444 aircraft to China's 2,942. Even if China builds 10,000 more planes, as it has pledged to do, American pilots will still have the upper hand in terms of training and support, though China has been improving its training programs and is developing new aircraft, including the J-20 and J-31, which will, in all likelihood, match up quite nicely with the US's upcoming F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. Because the seas are the likely theater for a war between China and America, it is vital that we take a closer look at both countries' naval power. The United States has a slight edge over China with 415 total ships compared to China's 352 total ships. That said, the United States boasts 19 aircraft carriers against a single aircraft carrier for China. It is highly unlikely that nuclear weapons would be employed by either of these countries since the threat of mutually assured destruction is too great. However, nuclear weapons are still important when measuring up the strength of these warfighting machines. In terms of nuclear warheads, the US has an estimated 5,100 warheads on standby while China has a mere 260. These numbers are constantly changing due to an agreement between Russia and the US to reduce nuclear stockpiles. But perhaps a more important factor is delivery systems. Both countries have intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of sending nuclear weapons to strike cities across the Pacific, and both countries have submarine-based missiles, although the US's are far more advanced. The US is also planning to station a defense system in South Korea capable of intercepting missiles fired from both North Korea and China. According to the Department of Defense, however, China is responding by developing new offensive missiles as well as methods to counter ballistic missile defenses. We must remember that almost every ground vehicle, aircraft, and naval unit needs fuel to be employed. China consumes 12 million barrels of oil a day and produces only 4.3 million barrels daily, with a 20 billion barrel oil reserve. The United States currently consumes 19 million barrels of oil a day, but produces 9 million barrels daily with a 37 billion barrel oil reserve. One of the most important resources when it comes to war is allies. Fortunately for the US, it is allied with a number of China's neighboring countries including Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Having close relationships with those countries, not to mention bases in Japan, gives the US more options and flexibility in the event of an outbreak of war. The United States boasts treaties that ally them with over 54 nations, while China has only 5 documented allies. Experience also plays a big factor in the strength of a military and its commanders. The United States has been actively engaged in a land war for the last decade, allowing it to try out new systems and tactics, making it more agile and well-equipped. China, on the other hand, has not been involved in a war since 1979. As we progress through the digital age, counterspace and cyber capabilities are becoming a critical part of a nation's strength. China has 70 military satellites used for communications, positioning and timing, navigation, and signals intelligence. It has also developed anti-satellite capabilities, such as directed energy weapons, satellite jammers, and anti-satellite missiles. In many respects, China is far more advanced in these areas, and it is said that China frequently uses cyber espionage to steal military secrets from the US. This has been a brief look at how the United States and China match up against one another. Who do you think would win the war? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more military and other comparison videos.
What's missing in your life? When
I was born on November 3rd, 1900, in the small town of Herzogenaurach, Germany. My mother ran her own laundry service, where my older brothers and sister would help when we could. We became known as the town's laundry boys. But that never bothered me, because I was always distracted by my father's work. A few years earlier, he had to close his family's textile business, and was forced to work in a local factory as a shoe cobbler. It was difficult to see his family business gone, but if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have created one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Since I can remember, I've always had a strong love for sports, and it was something I was great at. Not just one or two sports either. Track and field, skiing, soccer, football, boxing. I loved everything about every sport, but I was always bothered by the same thing in every sport: the shoes. Keep in mind, this was 1918, and back then, shoes were just shoes. To me, it seemed wrong using the same shoe for sprinting and soccer, as each sport was different. So, I set out to revolutionize the sports world by creating professional, specialized sports shoes that would improve performance. Unfortunately, my visions were halted when World War I broke out, and I was drafted into the war. I wasn't even 18 yet when I got drafted. It was something that changed how I would live the rest of my life, and promised myself to never waste another minute on something I didn't fully believe in. So, the moment I got back, I converted my mother's washroom into a shoe workshop. And along with my close friend, we built our own machinery from a bicycle, since Germany was in an economic depression. It was one of the most difficult times in my life, not knowing if what I was doing was right, whether I'd succeed, or if my ideas would work or amount to anything. But this is what I believed in, and it was what I was meant to do. One of our first shoes would be used for track. I experimented with many different types of materials ranging from kangaroo leather to shark skin. But in the end, I settled on cowhide and attached nails that we hand filed down into spikes to the bottom of the shoe. When I showed people, many thought it was funny or a fluke claiming it didn't work. I ignored their words, believing in the product and continued my work. Fortunately, my older brother saw the potential and joined me, as he was skilled in business and marketing. We created the Dassler Brothers Sport Shoe Factory. In 1936, at the German Olympic Games, my brother and I saw the perfect opportunity to show the world that our shoes were what athletes needed. We would equip athletes from all around the world with our shoes to be seen on the world stage. Showing our shoes worked. Many of our athletes would go on to win their events and positively praising our footwear. Our shoes reached the world stage when American Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals in track with our spiked shoes. The entire sporting world had never seen such shoes before, and orders began to pour in. But just as we opened new factories and began expanding, World War II broke out, changing everything. In order to keep the business alive, we were pressured to join the National Workers' Party, or risk losing everything and putting over 100 employees out of work. I was deeply saddened by everything. What mattered to me most had always been sports and its ability to bring people of all colors and nationalities together, not wars that tore families and people apart. My brother and I were drafted, but unlike my brother, I was released early in order to run the business. We tried to manage our split through letters, but my brother felt I wasn't handling the business well, and we began fighting more often. Eventually, after his return from the war, we decided to split ways, never speaking to each other again. He would become one of my biggest rivals with his own company, Puma. With the United States looking to help the German economy recover after the war, they provided me with leftover war materials so I could continue my work. I had a workforce, materials, my innovative spirit, but was missing a name for my shoes. I wanted to name it with the first 2 letters of my first name and the first 3 letters of my last, but that was already taken. So when registering, I decided to add an I in between, officially naming my sports shoe company Adidas. It was fitting since my nickname was already a D anyway. For the logo, I remembered I had created a football shoe with 3 stripes on the side added for stability. I thought it was the perfect symbol showing our innovative spirit as a trademark for our products, and that later became the famous 3 stripes. For the next few years, we continued to develop new technologies, always trying new ideas, even speaking with the orthopedics and working directly with athletes, hearing their needs, what adjustments they liked or didn't. I think this is what set us apart from all other competing companies. We listened to what people wanted, and together, we made ideas into realities, bettering all sports. People like Muhammad Ali and creating legendary boxing boots or the revolutionary Stan Smith tennis shoes that would later become a fashion icon showed the world that one shoe doesn't fit all. It was always about the shoes and the people who play the sport. The athletic competition, the trade, and part of the lifestyle, the way it brought people together, creating winners and losers, and then witnessing those who lost triumph and became greater pioneers of our time. It is our simple belief that shoes are more than just tools. They are the embodiment of entire generations as a symbol of ingenuity, but most of all, the determination never to give up.
Unfortunately for the United States,
I was born on November, became greater pioneer, but most of all, the determination never to give up. My name is Adolf Adi Dassler, and I created the sportswear company, Adidas.
I grew up poor in the housing projects of Brooklyn, New York. The word no has been said to me more than yes, but I never let that stop me from building the 5th largest food chain in the world. I'm now the 232nd richest person in the United States with a net worth of $2.9 billion. I was born on July 19th, 1953, to a family that didn't have a lot of money. Money was a challenge as my mother was a receptionist and my father was a World War II veteran working as a diaper delivery driver. They didn't have a college education, but they worked hard for the family and they loved their work. I don't know if they were ever able to enjoy life. When my father fractured his ankle while working, it brought us to our lowest point. Little money in our pockets, medical bills to pay, we lived by the day. It was difficult seeing hardworking people struggle for survival. I promised myself it wouldn't happen to anyone else. Most people worked their first job at 18. My first job was at 12 years old. I sold newspaper and worked in a local cafe. I guess you can say my childhood wasn't really much of a childhood except for playing sports. I wasn't a straight A student or most voted to succeed, but I was really good at American football. It was a way for me to escape my world and enjoy something I was good at. I worked hard and was awarded a football scholarship to Northern Michigan University, where I became the first person in my family to go to college. I always knew I wouldn't become a professional football player, but I did know I wanted to be educated. I worked hard for it and became the first person in my family to graduate from college. I worked various jobs and have always been determined to succeed at my goals. At 26 years old, I became vice president in charge of sales for a Swedish houseware company. No, it's not IKEA, if that's what you're thinking. In some people's minds, this would have been seen as successful. I mean, vice president isn't an easy job title at such a young age, but not me. I didn't feel happiness, joy, or fulfillment. Not until I visited a shop that was placing large orders for one of our items, a drip coffee maker. At the time, the two owners were selling whole coffee beans, teas, spices, and coffee-making accessories. I felt their passion and love for something as simple as coffee. Coffee! Can you believe it? Keep in mind, this was 1981, when coffee was a quick drink to get you through the workday. I knew this was where I belonged. I fell in love with what they created and the passion they had for something that was overlooked. For 1 year, I called, I asked, I nagged, and I visited asking them to let me join their team. I must have annoyed them really badly, because later that year, I became their director of marketing. 1 year into the job, I went on a business trip to Milan, and what I saw was a complete difference from American coffee drinking culture. People actually sat down and enjoyed their drinks. It was more than a drink. It was a relationship, a place where people went to meet, talk, and appreciate a finely made coffee. This was what we need, I thought. This was my second eureka moment. I told the owners of my vision, but they wanted to stay true to their current business of selling bulk items, not individual drinks. I didn't blame them. Americans at the time didn't even know what a latte was.
name? Oobile? It is? What's your name? What's your name? Like, are you deaf or Oobile? What? That makes no sense. No, but are you teamed with Death or Oobile? Are you teamed with them? Yeah. Do you know, has Oobile been on? No, bro, I don't want to buy anything. I want to know about Oobile, because Oobile owes me money, and it's about to get banned if he doesn't pay me.